You're watching the Weekly Recap with Matt Wacker.
Welcome back to the Weekly Recap. I'm Matt Wacker. The 36th annual Old Settlers Days took place July 30th and 31st in Waynesville. New this year were Civil War reenactments that included cavalry and cannon fire. Union and Confederate camps were on hand for visitors to explore, and festival goers enjoyed performances by Ulysses S. Grant and Abraham Lincoln impersonators. Leanne Mentink spoke with these historical celebrities.
Tell us about this battle that we're getting ready to see. Which battle is it, and the history behind that?
This actually would be kind of a skirmish. Of course, it's very difficult for any reenactor to reenact what it really would have looked like because we don't have thousands of people to encompass such a battle. So this is going to be obviously two sides, Confederate and Union, and we're going to have artillery, which would be the cannons and the heavy guns. And then you would have your foot soldiers, who would be your infantry. Now their infantry will advance, and we'll probably have about 30 on each side with Civil War replica muskets, which would have been the Springfields and the Enfields of the day in the 1860 periods. The cannon guns, some of them being original, could be anywhere from an 8-pound to a 12-pound cannon. A lot of people think that they shot those big round iron balls. Well, that was wars before Revolutionary and so forth. These actually were rifled, and they would take what we would call a bullet today, and it would spin. So the accuracy was quite impressive for the day, including the muskets as well. So you're going to see both sides clash. And also cavalry. Cavalry will also be here, which were the eyes and ears of any side of the war. And they usually clashed first because they were always in advance of the heavy cannons and the infantry. So you'll see the cavalry do their thing out there, infantry and cannons.
President Lincoln, what was the state of the country at this time from your standpoint?
We're into 1862, and at that point the battles were seesawing back and forth, Union victory, Confederate victory. The turning point didn't come probably until the middle of 1863 at Gettysburg, and then Vicksburg came, and the war turned, and eventually took almost exactly 4 years to come to an end.
At the expense of many lives and casualties?
600,000 dead. And that doesn't even count the wounded. A huge number for a country with less than 30 million population, 600,000.
And it took a significant number of years to come back from that?
I'm not so sure that it has ever come completely back. I was reelected to the presidency in November of 1864 and inaugurated for the second time in March of 1865, a little more than a month before the war finally came to an end. And at the end of my second inaugural address, I gave advice to the nation that had been ripped apart by the horror of a civil war that pitted brother against brother in many, many instances, including my wife's own family. And the advice that I gave was just as good in 1865 as I believe it to be still today. I said, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work that we are in. To bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle and his widow and his orphan, and do all we can to achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. All those things we still need to do. We need to finish the work we're in. We need to let love replace hate. Care for our veterans. Care for him who shall have borne the battle is the modern day motto of the VA. Achieve peace among ourselves and with all nations. We haven't managed that yet either. So the advice that I gave in 1865 holds equally true, I believe, over a century and a half later.
That's amazing. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Matt, back to you.
According to the Pulaski County Museum and Historical Society, the festival's Civil War reenactments were the first of their kind to be held in Pulaski County. Shantae McMillan may not have qualified for the U.S. Olympic team this year, but that doesn't mean she's taking time off. McMillan proved that she remains a world-class athlete by winning the Thorpe Cup. The competition is an international track and field heptathlon between the U.S. and Germany. Events include the 100-meter hurdles, high jump, shot put, long jump, javelin, and both a 200 and 800-meter run. Shantae took first at the event, winning by 162 points. The former VP of Mid-America Bank in Dixon has been sentenced in a criminal fraud case. 51-year-old Richard DeLong of Newburgh was indicted for defrauding the Small Business Administration out of $4 million. DeLong was then indicted again for defrauding the U.S. government out of $18 million while awaiting sentencing for the prior offense. DeLong has been sentenced to 3 years in prison without parole and has been ordered to pay $4.2 million in restitution. A Fort Leonard Wood drill sergeant was recently honored in an award ceremony on July 29th. Staff Sergeant Timothy Butler was awarded the Purple Heart for wounds sustained while serving with the 2nd Infantry Division in Iraq. In 2008, Butler's vehicle was hit by an IED, and he was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. Sergeant Butler said that receiving the medal doesn't make him a hero, and that he was simply doing his job. Leesburg is under scrutiny after poor performance in a state audit. Missouri State Auditor Nicole Galloway conducted an initial audit of the town in November of last year. The report identified several issues, including missing city funds, altered financial records, and possible nepotism concerns. Leesburg was given a follow-up evaluation in May, revealing that while some progress had been made towards fixing the situation, at least 6 problem areas out of the 25 identified had still not been addressed. A Rolla woman has been indicted in the death of her husband. 34-year-old Jennifer Lewis is charged with first-degree murder for withholding medication and medical care from her husband. A grand jury indicted Lewis, stating that by neglecting her husband, she was directly responsible for his death. The case was reviewed on August 2nd in Phelps County Circuit Court, and we hope to have more details on this story next week. A 61-year-old Edgar Springs man has been indicted for involuntary manslaughter. Sam Jones was accused in the death of Darlene McMahon. Jones allegedly suffocated the woman by duct taping a nebulizer mask to her face while she was sleeping. Jones is charged with second-degree manslaughter and will face a bond hearing on August 16th. 44-year-old Jonathan Latham of Gainesville has been charged with destruction of jail property after an altercation at the Ozark County Jail on May 11th. Viewers may remember Latham from a previous story when he was arrested for destroying a mobile home and tractor with a bulldozer. Latham was arrested in jail after tearing a communal television off the wall and damaging lights and other fixtures with a broom handle. Latham has waived his right to a preliminary hearing and will appear in court for arraignment on September 7th. Rejoice, football fans! We are just 2 weeks away from the return of the Game of the Week, sponsored by Price Chopper. The Fidelity 6 crew will begin the season in Rolla for the Bulldogs home opener against the Lebanon Yellow Jackets. It's sure to be another exciting season of Ozark Conference football, and we're proud to bring it to you. That's all for now. I'm Matt Wacker. Thanks for watching the weekly recap, and I'll see you next week. looks like I've found my fortune and glory. Watch the weekly recap with me, Matt Wacker, every Friday night at 6:30 on Fidelity Local 6.